Self-reported coping strategies of collegiate student athletes during the COVID-19 pandemic. The field of sports is one area that is highly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. In March of 2020, the World Health Organization classified severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, more commonly known as COVID-19, as a global pandemic. The government then imposed safety and confinement measures all over the country to prevent community transmission. Some of the major precautionary measures include stay at home orders, social distancing, travel restrictions, closure of non essential businesses, closure of schools, and postponement or cancellation of public gatherings, which include all sporting events in the country and the in person training of athletes. Over the summer of 2020, all professional sports leagues, as well as the major collegiate sports tournaments in the country, such as the UAAP and the NCAA, canceled their tournament seasons due to the continued health threats of COVID-19. As a result of this major halt in their sports life, student athletes had to restructure their training habits, goals, mindsets, sources of motivation, and their social connection with the team, in addition to adjusting to the online mode of academic learning and athletic training. While dealing with these unexpected and abrupt changes in their athletic and student life, they must also manage the uncertainty of what the future holds for them in their athletic career. The social isolation, lack of clear and definite timetable as to when tournaments will resume, the decision whether to continue or to end their collegiate career, especially for the seniors, and the lack of competition readiness due to limitations in physical and skills training may put a student athlete into an array of emotional and mental challenges that may make or break them. In general, literature suggests that COVID-19 pandemic might impact the mental health and the mood of people, and athletes are no exception to this. Being confined to their homes, athletes were forced to adopt to a new role, which is to be a family person, which could be overwhelming for some. Disengagement from relationships is also a possible cause of worry. Some researchers posited that confinement during the pandemic has led to several psychological reactions such as depression, increased anxiety, low motivation to train and exercise, changes in sleep and diet patterns, sense of loss, and mental distress. One study reported that most athletes have struggled to keep themselves motivated to exercise, and there was a significant decrease in athletes' participation in sport specific activities, specifically on strength training, endurance, and mobility. For many athletes who have engaged in very rigorous training prior to pandemic, the unexpected cancellation of competitions may have affected their sense of direction, self-confidence, and perceived sport competence. Athletes are not also spared from experiencing COVID-19 related loss and grief. Having a family member, a friend, or close acquaintance become seriously ill or die due to COVID-19 can result to potential modifications in their identity and motivation, both in life and in the sport domain. Literature has reported that athletes used adaptive and maladaptive coping strategies during the pandemic. Some have used active planning, seeking support, cognitive restructuring, and emotion regulation. Acceptance of the situation is also commonly reported as a coping strategy. The objective of this present study is to examine the specific coping strategies that collegiate student athletes employed while the COVID-19 pandemic is ongoing. Using the coping model formulated by Parker and Endler, the coping strategies were categorized into three types: task oriented or problem focused, emotion oriented or person focused, and avoidance oriented in the form of task and social diversions. Task orientation refers to strategies used to solve a problem, reconceptualize it cognitively, or minimize its effects, while person orientation refers to strategies that may include emotional responses, self preoccupation, and fantasizing reactions. A third dimension which they included in the coping model is the avoidance oriented coping, involving both task and person oriented strategies. Task oriented avoidance is conceptualized as distraction, while person oriented avoidance takes the form of social diversion. For the methodology employed, this study utilized a qualitative approach to describe the coping strategies of the participants. Survey method was applied. Participants were requested to answer an online survey using Google Forms. The electronic survey, which was distributed through the sports office, has open ended or qualitative questions which inquired about the current whereabouts and the overall health, academic, family, mental, and emotional conditions of the student athletes and to know their ways of coping with the current pandemic. Thematic analysis was done to analyze the qualitative data gathered. Common themes were closely examined and summarized based on the topics, thoughts, and patterns that came up repeatedly in the responses given. A total of 309 out of 527 collegiate varsity players ranging from rookies to seniors from 14 sports events responded to the survey. They are enrolled in different degree programs in a university of different academic year levels and attending the online mode of classes and athletic training while there is an ongoing pandemic. For the results from the data gathered, 186 out of 309 or 60.19% of student athletes indicated that they are coping well with the COVID-19 pandemic, while 34.95% responded maybe, but interestingly listed down specific coping strategies that they employed to cope. A small percentage of the respondents indicated that they are not coping well during the pandemic. Majority of the athletes utilized task-oriented or problem-focused coping, followed by avoidance-oriented and emotion-oriented or person-focused coping strategies. A few of the respondents did not specify any strategies used to cope but indicated that they are coping well, while almost 21% of them utilized more than one type of strategy. It was derived from the results that student athletes use the task-oriented or problem-focused strategies that are centered on taking actions to modify the situation or in generating alternative solutions to minimize the effect of the pandemic in their life. The common themes that were found would reflect that they are focused on the following: their academic and modified athletic goals, complying with government prescribed health and safety protocols, adopting a healthy lifestyle, learning new skills to manage the problem, and maximizing available support. They devoted their time to attend to other important responsibilities such as attending online classes and team trainings and doing academic requirements. They have looked for alternative solutions to aid them and their families financially while the pandemic is ongoing. They learned new skills that will allow them to earn, and they explored community and online sources of support which they can avail for information and assistance. Data gathered likewise showed that emotion-oriented coping strategies were adopted by the athletes to regulate the different emotions triggered by the pandemic and to maintain physical and mental wellness. Specific strategies include having a positive mindset and engaging oneself with self-care activities, physical and spiritual activities that may ease the stress brought about by the pandemic. Positive mindset mostly describes staying grateful despite the unpleasant situation and having the acceptance that they can no longer compete during the rest of the tournament season, but remains clear about the importance of maintaining physical and mental fitness. Commonly used activities to manage their emotions are meditation, prayer, holding on to one's faith, journal writing, practice of mindfulness, and exercise. There was also effort to maintain other pre-pandemic activities that are still doable even through a different mode to feel a sense of normalcy out of the unusual situation that is being experienced. Results also revealed that avoidance-oriented coping strategies were very much adopted by the student athletes. Task-oriented activities include keeping oneself busy with household chores, hobbies, and other relaxation activities, while person-oriented activities, which are considered social diversions, include online interaction with friends and family members who are away from home. It was evident that most of the respondents kept themselves busy with household chores um, and with hobbies that were not part of their daily or weekly routine prior to pandemic, while others have preoccupied themselves with online activities such as gaming, using social media, and watching movies or TV series. Others would distance themselves from the stressful situation by sleeping and by not reading or watching the news about the pandemic. For the conclusions, it can be said that majority of the student athletes are coping with the stress brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic and that strategies to cope are in place. The use of problem-focused coping strategies allowed them to restructure their goals while on quarantine and be creative in generating alternative solutions to their problems. The use of emotion oriented coping strategies help them to discover the resources within themselves and how to be able to use them to maintain physical, emotional, and mental wellness. The avoidance oriented coping strategies allow them to rediscover their interest for other activities as well as their roles in their families and to reconnect with people through a different platform. While in many cases these student athletes did not have control over the existing environmental circumstances, they still opted to assume control over their emotional responses and their willingness to adopt their goals and routines accordingly, perhaps to stay close to their sport engagement and athletic identity despite the uncertainty. Self efficacy allowed them to experience control over their stressors and regulate their functioning in the different roles that they must perform in their academic, sports, and families. Findings may also indicate that these athletes have the capacity to develop and implement a self care plan in order to protect themselves from stress. It is recommended that interventions to improve psychological flexibility and coping should be extended to those who are unable to manage the stress brought about by the pandemic. Thank you very much.